Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into parental conflict and child. We're going to explore a profoundly fascinating concept together. How an argument isn't just some passing, stressful moment, but a powerful, active signal that is literally shaping a child's development in real time. Okay, let's dive into this by confronting a massive myth right off the bat. The big question: is all conflict harmful to a child? You know, we tend to think in these really simple yes or no terms, assuming that every single raised voice or minor disagreement fundamentally damages a kid. But honestly, that simply isn't true. Conflict itself is not automatically the harm. As we'll see, the real impact depends heavily on how often, and how safely that conflict actually happens. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to separate the disagreement from the pattern. Think about it. As adults, when we fight, we're completely focused on the topic, right? The money, the chores, the boundaries. But children, they aren't just listening to the topic of the argument. They are absorbing the entire emotional climate surrounding it, the frequency, the tone, the intensity, and crucially, whether a repair happens afterward. The exact same argument about doing the dishes can leave one child shaken for hours and another completely unaffected, entirely because of the pattern surrounding it. Think of it a bit like navigating an old walled city. Two people can walk down the exact same narrow street, but what matters isn't just the street itself, it's whether the path is overwhelmingly crowded, blocked, noisy, and highly pressurized. In the exact same way, parental conflict becomes more or less harmful depending on the environment surrounding it. The surroundings dictate how difficult the journey actually is for the child. Here's the thing. A child just does not process conflict the way an adult does. The very first impact of a fight isn't a life lesson. It's an immediate, primal, body-level response. While parents are arguing about the electric bill, the child's brain is rapidly firing off fundamental survival questions. Am I safe? Is this going to stop? Do I need to stay alert? Am I somehow involved in this? They are listening for safety, absolutely not for the specific logistics of the disagreement. And when those deep survival questions pop up, the child's brain shifts into what we can call watching mode. Our human brains are incredibly well built to notice threats early. We literally don't wait for full proof before reacting. So the child scans. They're looking for harsh tones, slammed doors, tense faces, or even just a sudden emotional coldness in the room. The brain is noticing possible danger long before a child has the vocabulary to ever explain it in words. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept. Imagine a smoke alarm in your house. That alarm cannot tell the difference between a little bit of harmless haze from burning toast and a real, dangerous house fire. Its job isn't to understand the whole nuanced story, its job is to alert you, and do it quickly. Parental conflict works in a remarkably similar way. It activates the child's stress system immediately, sounding the alarm even when the kid has absolutely no idea what the conflict is actually about. So the crucial point to take away here is that the body reacts before the story is understood. Long before any mature reasoning kicks in, that internal smoke alarm triggers very real physical changes. We're talking muscle tension, a racing heart, stomach discomfort, sleep disruption, startle reactions. This completely changes the child's internal state. You're probably not going to hear a 5-year-old say, "Excuse me, I feel the family system is unstable right now," but you will absolutely see clinginess, freezing, or trouble settling down. Now, once that physical threat response is activated, their attention naturally narrows. Think of a smartphone battery. If you've got a dozen heavy, power-hungry apps running in the background, the screen might still be on, but the battery is draining incredibly fast. It leaves almost no power for a new task. Unresolved conflict steals attention exactly like this. The child's mental energy is entirely consumed by monitoring the vibe of the room, leaving far fewer resources available for just being a kid, for play, curiosity, or doing their schoolwork. But listen, not every child experiences this stress in the exact same way. A child's specific position in the conflict drastically changes the meaning of the event. Think of two people hearing the same loud fire siren. One is standing safely on the sidewalk across the street, the other is trapped inside the burning building. It's the exact same sound, but a totally different meaning. A child who is safely kept out of the crossfire might still be affected, sure, but a child who is heavily burdened as a messenger, forced to take sides, or directly yelled at, they are carrying a significantly heavier psychological load. If we zoom out from these immediate, in-the-moment reactions, we can start to see how this impacts long-term development. There's a great saying for this. A single raindrop does almost nothing, but a steady leak changes the wall. One single argument is just a raindrop. It might alarm a child temporarily, but it dries up. But repeated, unresolved conflict, that's a steady leak. It actually trains the nervous system.
It teaches the developing brain exactly what to expect from the world, and those expectations eventually shape development itself.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the child's default settings. There are three broad interconnected systems shaped by this repeated exposure. First, emotion regulation. Basically, how a child handles their feelings. Second, thinking and attention, how they process information. And third, relationships and trust, how they connect with other human beings. Think about the domino effect here. If a child is always bracing for tension, regulating emotion is harder. If emotion is hard to regulate, attention suffers, and if both of those are unstable, building trusting relationships becomes incredibly difficult.
Looking closely at that first system, emotion regulation, we often see a child's system unconsciously choose one of two primary survival strategies when their home environment isn't easy to relax in. They might become hyperreactive, meaning easily angered, tearful, impulsive, very defensive. Or, on the flip side, they might become over-controlled, quiet, overly careful, withdrawn, and just emotionally shut down. What's wild is that both of these completely different behaviors are actually adaptations to the exact same underlying message, that big feelings or disagreements are dangerous.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely flips the script on what we typically label as bad behavior. When you see a child who appears to be not trying, well, underneath their attention might just be completely overloaded. A kid who is easily distracted might actually have a mind that is urgently scanning the room for a threat. Forgetful could just mean their working memory is under immense strain from chronic stress. And what looks like pure defiance is frequently a highly intelligent biological defensive adaptation to a really stressful environment.
And it goes beyond just behavior. Conflict deeply teaches a child the rules of human connection. If parents fight in cruel or unpredictable ways, a child learns unhealthy rules. They learn that people attack when they're upset, or that closeness is fundamentally unsafe. But, and this is a huge but, if a disagreement is followed by a calm apology and repair, the child learns incredibly healthy rules. They learn that a disagreement doesn't destroy the bond. They learn that repair is always possible. They learn that strong emotions can be survived.
It's important to recognize that adaptations like intense watchfulness or staying super quiet are actually highly useful survival tools for a child navigating a tense home in the short term. It keeps them safe. The problem arises when these short-term adaptations become long-term burdens. There's an incredibly heady cost if the child never gets to leave that mode. Over time, vigilance hardens into anxiety. Self-protection hardens into deep, rigid mistrust. The adaptation just stays switched on, even when the child moves into perfectly safe settings later in life.
When we synthesize all these variables, we can finally see the whole system at once. If the repeated exposure is unrepaired arguments, the child learns that repair is unlikely, and the likely long-term developmental effect is guardedness and mistrust. But if the exposure involves calm repair after the conflict, the child learns that relationships can and do recover, leading to better regulation and a real sense of security. The child doesn't just passively witness conflict, they extract a rule about reality from it. Expectations become habits, and patterns become development.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Parental conflict shapes children not simply because arguments are unpleasant to listen to, but because it actively trains their expectations of the entire world. So, taking a step back to look at the patterns around you, I want to leave you with this. What rules of connection is your environment teaching? Are you showing that small problems become big quickly, or are you showing that ruptures can be safely repaired? It's a powerful lens to look through and one that gives us immense clarity on how to build environments where children feel truly, deeply secure. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning the patterns around you.